Welcome back to Sub-Zero Hero, where we have headed to Norway. We have taken charge of Tromsdal and a team from deep inside the Arctic Circle who play in Norway's third tier. And we're going to see how far we can take them in the footballing world without signing any players and just relying on their youth intakes. We've got 3 seasons down, and in this episode we've got much to show you. We're going to catch you up on what happened at the end of the last campaign, and we're going to do a thorough youth review as well. We're going to look at the players we've had come through over the last 2 seasons and how they've developed, but we're also going to have a look at the batch that have come through for this season too. So before we bring you up to speed with the development or lack thereof of our youth players, let's just catch you up on the end of last season, because we very nearly came back for the last day of it, and not because it looked like we were going to get relegated and sacked. We've been offered a new 1-year contract, so we're here and secure in our job. And for a while there, we actually looked like we might steal a place in the playoffs for promotion. In our last episode, where we'd made it back-to-back 3-2 wins, we then went into the game against Skeid, who were above us in the table, and we beat them 3-0, before a game against Bratvorg, and we beat them 4-2. So with just 2 games remaining at the end of last season, we were just 2 points behind Chelsea, who were clinging on to that promotion playoff spot that we wanted. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take it to the final game of the season because in a game against Horde, they equalised in the 88th minute. A disappointing goal to concede because our right winger Vegard Leesvold had 2 opportunities to clear the ball, and twice he clattered it into the face of an opponent, 2 different opponents no less, before Horde worked an opportunity on the edge of the box and managed to equalise. So going into the final game of the season, there was nothing to play for other than pride and positions in the league. So we decided to play 4 of our youth players, playing Simon Sunday, Ludvig Dreyer, Asbjorn Eriksson and Gussa as well. And Gussa managed to get himself 2 assists in this game. But perhaps more significantly, we had the first goal by one of our academy graduates. Asbjorn Eriksson got it. It wasn't pretty. Grunvoll hurled in the long throw. Eriksson escaped his marker and nodded home at the far post. But we've now got a goal for one of our youth players, and Gersa looked very good in this game as well. So if we have a look at the table and where that leaves us, you'll see that, well, again, it was a 5th place finish. So in our 3 seasons, we've come 4th and 5th and 5th. This was the closest I'd felt we'd got, though. We did concede a lot more goals this season, more than double last, but we scored almost double as well. So it was a more entertaining season, and almost going into the last day of the season with a chance of getting a playoff place. Felt like we were there or thereabouts, but to kick on to the next level, we're going to need some of our youth players to step up into the first team now and make an impression. Maybe we should check out how they've been getting on. So to be honest, before FM21, I hadn't done a lot of youth development. When you're managing in the lower leagues, you do tend to sign your way to promotions rather than develop. So this has been a steep learning curve, but this is what we've been doing when we've been taking in each youth intake. I've taken all of their attributes and I've been plugging them into a spreadsheet so that I can see how each of these attributes are developing over time. And what I've been doing is giving each player a raw score when they come through by adding all of their attribute points together. Now, I know that can be a bit misleading. A striker who's got tackling of 20 isn't necessarily going to be better than a striker with tackling of 1. Even though their overall attribute scores might be higher. So it's not a foolproof system, but it is interesting to see how many attribute points players are coming through with and how many they're getting after we've been training them. Some of our players have made pretty limited progress, to be honest. This is Kolbjorn Borch, who I thought had the potential to be a first team central defender, but have a look at the progress or lack thereof that he's been making over 2 years. He's gone up by just 7 attribute points. Hardly stunning progress, and he's not alone. This is Victor Nyholm, who, when he came through at 16 years old and 6'7", I was licking my lips at the potential of this as a target man, but over 2 years, well, he's certainly been consistent. He went up 2 attribute points in his first season, and just 2 more in his second, And in total, his attributes only come to 253. I'm not saying that he won't still go on and be a useful player because of his physical prowess, but it's not like he's been making rip-roaring progress. But we've had other players that have been even worse than that. This is Hugo Turnison, that when he came through, I thought he might be a striking option. Well, look at this young pup's development. He stood still in his first year, and little did we know that was the successful year, because he went back 11 attribute points during year 2, which has made us get our thinking caps on. What's causing this? Is it personality? Is it the team that they're getting their game time with? Is it the lack of game time? Is it the coaches, the facilities, the training? We've thrown it all in the mixer and we've been thinking about it, because we've had other players who we are really wanting to blood into our first team. And this season I'm thinking Andre Gersa's going to be our first choice right winger, but his progress is concerning. He's made 27 appearances for the first team, plus all the appearances he's made for the under-19s as well. And he went backwards by 1 attribute in the first season, and he made that up in the second. But he's no better player now than when he came through 2 years ago. So that's definitely a cause for concern. It's not all bad news though. Look at players like Ludwig Dreyer, who came through with quite a decent score, 290 attributes, and has now progressed by 23 attribute points at a part-time club in the Norwegian 3rd tier. I'm thinking Ludwig could well be one of our first choice central midfielders during this season, but he's not even the player from his youth intake cohort that has made the greatest progress. That is Asbjorn Eriksson, who didn't come in with the highest score at 275, but is now trained on by a further 37 attribute points. So that's certainly not a bad score. And of course, what that means is if we look at the first year's youth intake, Eriksson has gone up by far the most attributes. He's not a million miles off going up double his next challenger and treble the 3rd place improver of Alexander Blomdahl. So if you look at those top 3, it seems to suggest that maybe those professional and fairly professional personalities of youth players are what helped them gain the most attribute points. But if you also look at the number of youth appearances that Asbjorn Eriksson has made, well, maybe that has been the key behind it as well. Certainly when you add Dreyer's 10 first team appearances to his 59 youth appearances over 2 seasons, they've played a similar number of games, and those have been the players that have improved the most. But what about Hugo Turnison down the bottom there? I mean, he's made 71 youth appearances, more than Eriksson, and has gone backwards by 11 attribute points. So is it his personality that's the problem for him? But how would you explain John Watson down there? I mean, fairly professional personality, granted, he's not made the most appearances and has suffered some injuries. Maybe that's the reason why he's not developed as well. But the one that concerns me the most is Gersa. Balanced personality is not the worst in the world, and he's made plenty of appearances, more than any other player, I think, and has made no progress whatsoever. So certainly something to think about. But of course, we've had 2 years worth of youth intakes now. Let's have a look at the class of youth players in the year below. And again, there are some players that have made some terrible progress. Look at this for 1 year's work. Albert Eskilsson has gone backwards 17 attribute points in a season. That's impressive work. And his personality of resilience is one that I would have actually thought you wanted in and around your squad. He's got determination of 15, but when it comes to training, the resilient personality hasn't helped him out because he has made pretty poor progress. Others have been much better though. This is Ollie Ars, who in just 1 year has gone up by 12 attribute points. Came in at 266, is now at 278. Looking pretty good. Not as good as this guy though. Ollie Christian Jensen came in with the highest attribute score of either of our 2 years, 315, and has gone up another 13 during the last season. And I'm thinking at just 16 years old, tender as he might be playing in the first team this season as well as getting plenty of youth team games, because I reckon there's a player there that we can really develop, and if we can mentor that determination up with that kind of bravery and work rate and those physicals heading in the right direction, definitely a player I think we can work with there. Here's the one that concerns me a little bit more though. I was in pieces when a model citizen came through the youth intake. Over the course of the season, he's only progressed by 5 points. He's played plenty of games, but his score is now 286, way beyond other players in his intake, granted, but I thought a model citizen might train an awful lot better than that. So that wasn't the best season of progress I thought we might get out of a player, but we've had some pretty decent performances out of the first year group. So Auden Schoneson leads the way. He's a right winger who's very quick, not the best technically, but this time a fairly determined personality led the way. And look at players like Jonas Lenning with the fairly professional personality. They actually went backwards a point. So in year one, those professional personalities were the best. In year two, not so good. And look at Eirika Juliusson, unambitious personality. He's gone up 13 points. I mean, how do you explain an unambitious personality going up more than a model citizen? Not entirely sure I've learnt the science behind this yet. And again, look at players like Lars Oyvind Kolstad, a driven personality. That's a brilliant personality. He's gone backwards 2 attribute points. Certainly not perfect, but it means that if we have a look at how our players are now sitting overall in terms of their total attributes, well, Ollie Christian Jensen looks like our brightest prospect, followed by Dreyer, Eriksson. Gersa's still down there, but he's making no progress. Sunday is definitely a prospect as well. And I'm reckoning 4, maybe 5 of these players are going to be in the first team this season, as we see a little bit of a changing of a guard. But we've also had a new batch of players come through as well. And I reckon there's 2 in there, at least, that really could be first team players for us in years to come. We should probably show you those next. So here is the first of them. On the whole, this wasn't the best youth intake. When we got the message from our head of youth development, it actually came with the caveat that this wasn't going to be the strongest batch of players, and so it proved. There were very few good personalities amongst them. Gives us a bit of a dilemma with the head of youth development. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is Yngvi Magnus Antonsen, another centre-half who I'm thinking could slot in there next to Simon Sunday for years to come and be a pretty rugged, decent centre-half. He's not the quickest, but everything else for a defender is pretty much in place. Good personality, it would seem, in being fairly professional. Determination's there, bravery's there, aggression's there. Good in the air as well. Tackling's great. Marking needs some work. I reckon he is okay. And the other player that came through that looked pretty decent is Jonas Richardson. Again, not the fastest. We're going to have to work on it, but brave. Good passer, decent technique, work rate, teamwork are there. Strength needs work, but as a left back, which we are crying out for, I reckon he's okay, and we might drip feed him into the first team over the next 2 seasons and see how he gets on. So we've definitely got a couple of players in the new batch that are really quite promising. Other players of note, Raimo Lindroos came through, another centre-half come left-back, who is not the worst player in the world. I'm not sure how a spirited personality will get on. We will have to wait and see. We've had our 3rd goalie come through in 3 youth intakes, who on paper doesn't look too bad, but it's the 3rd one in a row that's come through with not a great personality. We've had 2 keepers come through that are unambitious, and the first one came through with low self-belief. So whether we found a keeper that's going to play for our first team yet, I'm not entirely sure. Let's talk you through why we're here. The staff that we've now got. If you have a look, We are leading the division in most of the areas of training now. There's only goalkeeper handling where we lag behind some of the others. What we've been doing is, rather than expand the coaching team that play with the first team, we've been expanding the coaching team that coach the youth players and the second team as well, because the good thing about the second team coaches is that they coach both first team and youth, so they're of dual use to us. And rather than bringing in general coaches for the first team, we've brought in a goalkeeper coach and a fitness coach because they can work with players of all ages. So this is our assistant manager, who's only come in recently, Raw Strand. Granted, he's not the greatest in terms of coaching attributes, but it's the personality and the mentals that got him the job as assistant manager, just to make sure, with that high level of discipline and determination, that training is run well. Then we've got a fitness coach, who again has got a decent personality, being fairly determined. And I know you're thinking, a fitness coach with fitness coaching of 8 isn't brilliant, but trust me, in the Norwegian third tier, that's pretty good, and he works with the youngsters as well. Our goalkeeper coach is a Swede called Kim Erström. This one doesn't have the best personality, granted, but it does have good goalkeeping coaching for this level, and he works with the under-19s as well as the first team. We've got a performance analyst as well to help us scout the opposition. Let's just have a look while we're here, though, at our head of youth development. Now, we've gone back and forth on our head of youth developments. This is Rooney Kervenvolden, who was our youth development, head of youth development for our first youth intake. Then we dismissed him and hired somebody else. Then we rehired him for the third intake. His first intake was good. His second intake, our third, didn't blow me away. I was drawn back in by his professional personality, because that really did help develop professional and fairly professional youth intakes during the first year. So I thought I'd return to that. Didn't help with the third intake, so I might have a look at that. Let's just have a look specifically at who's working with the under-19s. We've got a coaching vacancy left to fill. Last season, Ivar Selnish was our under-19s manager, but I've taken over that duty for this year. He's dropped down to just being a coach, much to like there. And this is Lennart Grunlund, who is a model professional. Determination's not the best. Coaching attributes aren't brilliant, but he's only got a Continental C license. So I like to hire them with the good personalities and mentals and hope that coaching courses might help with their abilities as a coach. So that's who's working with our youngsters, as well as, by the way, we also have our 2 Tromsdalen 2 coaches. So this is Mate Julo, who we poached from Alta just up the road, fairly professional personality. And also we've got Ola Tullberg, who's only balanced, but is a pretty good coach with good coaching attributes. So he works with them as well. So in terms of our youth players, through the early pre-season friendlies and going into the start of the season, I'm thinking 3 of them are going to be in our starting 11. I'm thinking that with such modest development during the first season, I'm just going to plunge Simon Sunder into the first team. I mean, he's a model citizen. You want to try and utilise that if you can. And he's already not too far behind other central defenders like Tobias Vibe when you do the little comparison of them. So if I find Vibe there, you'll see that Vibe's definitely got the edge physically. He's a bit quicker. And in terms of things like vision as well, he has the edge. But Simon Sunder is already better aerially, better mentally, and his defending is not far behind. So I'm thinking of just throwing him into the first team and seeing how he develops. Gersa is definitely going to be the right wing for us, but again, you can see his arrows are moving in all different directions, but he's played pretty well during the pre-season campaign, and he played pretty well in the last few games of last season, getting a couple of assists as well. So we're going to plug away with him, and we're thinking one of our 2 midfield berths is going to be taken by a youngster every game. Dreyer for most of them, Eriksson coming in, maybe even the guy who's a year younger, Jensen, coming in and playing some games as well. Maybe one of those 3 will prove themselves better than the other two and might start most of those games for us. Here is, by the way, why our young mate Andre Gersa is going to be starting for us on the right wing. We've made the decision, if we can find it and have a look at the players that we have released, we've made the decision to let one of our more established players go. Vegard Leesvold was our starting striker, well, for 3 seasons really, and we moved him out onto the right side as well last season. To sign a new contract, he wanted to be a star player, and he wanted still quite a lot of money, and his physical attributes were on the wane, and he's going to be turning 34 this season. We've decided to let him go, not just so he doesn't block the progress of a youngster, but also because of dynamics reasons as well. We had 3 players who were at the top of the hierarchy that all looked to be retiring at the same time. We had Leesvold, we've got Kim Bendixson, who's now 33, and we've also got Carlson, who is 33. And I thought if all 3 of those retired at the same time, it might leave a little bit of a void. So Tobias Vibe has stepped up at the age of 32. We're thinking maybe Bendixson we might let leave at the end of his contract this year and see if we can get another player, maybe Loveland, maybe even Asali Hansen, who's a lot younger, to step up and be one of those team leaders in the hierarchy. So we're not left with a hierarchy void by all 3 of them leaving the club at the same time. One other thing that we might show you this season is that we have decided that we are going to loan out some of our players. So if we have a look at the loan deals, we've let one of our goalkeepers go out on loan just to try and get him some game time. We've let Julian Bakabor, who was making terrible progress, we've thrown him out on loan. And all of these players that have gone on loan have gone out with the requirement that they will be star players for the teams that they move to. And you can see that in the case of Rahman, who doesn't have a great personality, well, he seems to be training well already with the club that he is on loan with. So that looks encouraging. So this is what we've got ready for our 4th season. We really are going to try and press on this season, but it's going to be difficult. We've lost some of the old guard. We've promoted some of the younger boys. We are going to be at the mercy of how quickly they develop and adapt to first team football. I guess we're going to see you for the first game of the season for our first sign of the progress these boys are making as they try to help us become a Sub-Zero hero.